Welcome, everyone, to the Tuesday, September 24th, 2019 Planning Commission meeting. We call this meeting to order. We don't have a gavel, but hey, that might work. So let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, roll call.
Sure. Commissioner Moore,
Present.
Commissioner Fung,
Present.
Commissioner Takahashi,
Here.
Vice Chair Saxena,
Here.
Chairperson Wong,
Here.
all present.
Very cool. All right, we've got approval of minutes, and we've got some notes around that. We've got two sets of minutes, the draft minutes of August 13th and the draft minutes of September 10th. Any comments beforehand?
Excuse me, Chair Wong. For the August 13th, 2019 minutes, due to the fact that I'm a named petitioner in the SB 35 lawsuit, I will be recusing from the approval of those minutes and then returning for the September 10th minutes.
Okay, sounds good. As we wait for Commissioner Moore to leave, for those out there, if you want to fill out a blue card, please feel free to do that. It ties with 3 minutes of conversation or your thoughts to share with us. All right, so let's do the vote. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Go ahead. I move to approve the minutes of August 13th, 2019 as submitted.
Second.
All right, let's start the vote.
What happened?
All right, we'll say the vote. Here we go. Okay, so motion carries 3-0-1 with 1 abstention from Commissioner Moore. Okay, let's bring her back in. Yeah. All right, next item is the draft minutes of September 10th. Is there?
Chair Wong?
Yeah.
I think it was noted over here that perhaps in reading the vote, you may have said 3-0-1. I think it was 3-0-2 with 2 abstentions, 1 recusal, 1 abstention.
Oh, does the recusal count as an abstention?
In this instance, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, should be 3-0-2. Let's correct that for the record. Thank you. All right, second item here, approval minutes from draft minutes of September 10th, 2019. Recommended action, approve or modify the draft minutes of September 10th, 2019. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move that we adopt the minutes of September 10th, 2019 as submitted.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, start the vote. All right, everyone's voted. Let's see what we have. Okay, motion carries 4-0-1. Okay,
4-0-1 with Commissioner Takahashi abstaining.
yes, Commissioner
you.
Takahashi abstention. Okay, no postponements. Let's move to oral communications. I'll call your name up and please come to the dais and speak for 3 minutes. So first person here, Jennifer Griffin.
Planning Commission. Oh, is this up? Yeah, it's
You're-
working.
you're
wow. Okay. Hi, I'm Jennifer Griffin, and I just wanted to bring you all up to date on some of the problems that are going on in Portland. If you all are aware, their governor signed HB 2001 on August 8th, which essentially does an SB 50 or SB 35 or 330 on the whole state, including Portland, which has many, many R1 neighborhoods. I also recently found out that as of July and August, the city of Portland and some of the people, I would call them officials, I'm not sure if they're elected or not, were trying to have the neighborhood associations not be allowed to make any comments on city information about their own city, and it would be disregarded by the city of Portland. That kind of was mind-boggling to me, because I have relatives in Portland, and I'm aware they have neighborhoods that are just like Willow Glen. Some of these neighborhoods are from the 1920s, 1910, if you've ever been up to Portland, or if you even watched that that TV show, I forgot what it was called. It was about vampires or something. Anyway, they were trying to stifle the input of all the neighborhood associations, and that no one had contacted the neighborhood associations. So essentially right now, it is becoming a major brouhaha. I have found out that they were censoring 92 neighborhoods in Portland. And we're talking about 92 neighborhoods the size of Willow Glen. That would be like San Jose essentially stifling 92 of their neighborhoods. This is beyond mind-boggling. Evidently, the people that were involved in writing up these documents did not consult the neighborhoods, and the neighborhoods now are, I would say, outraged. I mean, to me, that is the very level of censure of local control. Someone does not want these neighborhoods to say anything. And it's strange to me that this happened right at the same time that HB 2001 was signed. Portland is the biggest city by far, 600,000. It is way bigger than the other cities in Oregon. And I would say at this point, they need to have an investigation into why this happened at the same time. You cannot censure 92 neighborhood associations that are over 100 years old. That just does not happen. That is not democracy. And I used to think highly of Portland, but I am beginning to reconsider that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Next on the agenda, Lisa Warren, followed by Peggy Griffin.
Hello, thank you. So, sorry, give me 2 seconds to get my
Oh, take your
correct
time.
page.
And welcome.
Unless I left it back here. Thanks. So, it became known to me today that the city has conducted yet another economic analysis related to what is now currently the zoning for Valco Shopping Special District area. The city hired an independent economic consultant who confirmed that at least 2 potential development scenarios are economically feasible at the Valco site, the way it is currently zoned. On August 20th this year, I was compelled on the spot to speak on City Council Item 11 after hearing Jonathan Bass, an attorney for the Valco Property Owners, LLC, talk about laws of economics and financial assumptions. If you haven't seen it, it's interesting to hear what he said. I'm here to summarize what I had to share that night. In late 2014, demands publicly surfaced in a threat letter, it's commonly known as, sent to this body, specifically written to Planning Commissioner at the time, Chair Paul Brophy, and signed by Peter Powell. The letter was dated October 13th, 2014. Please remember that Peter Powell, AKA Sandhill Property Company, and his investors closed escrow on the purchase of Valco Shopping Mall on November 12th, 2014. That was midway between the letter to the Planning Commissioner and the exhausting 3 consecutive day City Council meeting that ended notoriously on December 4th, 2014, with 2 brand new council members. What this timeline illustrates is that Sandhill Property Company et al. Knowingly purchased a 50-plus acre property that was zoned for something very different than what Sandhill Property was detailing as Mr. Powell's needs or his wish list. Where we stand now, I just want it on record with Planning Commission, since that's where this letter began. And as I said, it's in oral communications from August 20th City Council meeting as well. I just think it's critical to remember he bought what he bought. He shouldn't get what he wants. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Welcome, Jennifer Griffin.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners, City staff. In preparing for tonight's meeting, I was on the website, and can you see this?
Let's put that up. Thank you.
I went to get documents, just to make sure I had what you thought was the latest. And I have to tell you that every time I go, I'm concerned that I don't have the latest, even when I download them. First, this is the website with the general plan. This says 2015 to 2014, and then there's no document link. Then I said, okay, then I was looking for the table of contents, but this is grayed out and there's no link. That's just this week's version. Then I went to the heart of the city, and I know this document was December 4th, 2014, so it's almost 5 years old. And I'm asking you guys, I see the Planning Commission and the Planning Department as keepers of these documents, and I'd like you to be consistent. Maybe use adopted for new documents that have been created and amended for the ones that have been revised by resolution. And as I was reading, it's not in focus. What do I do?
Move the paper a little bit and give it a shot. It should autofocus. Let's see. Not yet. There it is.
Okay. I pushed a button. Okay. Anyway, it says 2015 general plan.
2005.
2005. And then, so that's an error on this page, page 5. Then I go down and it says general plan policies in effect related to the heart of the city attached as Appendix B. So I go to Appendix B, and it says policies from the general plan, LU 13.1 to 13.8. So I go to the general plan. There is no 13.8. So there's no policy related to that. So then I go to the revision dates to see how many times it was revised. It says amendments by City Council as of January 2012. Well, here are all these other dates. And the last update is 2014. And it says ordinance number, but these are resolutions. So that is worrisome. You're trying to do objective standards. Everything needs to be consistent and accurate. Also, I would recommend on these documents that you add the date it originally was created so people can walk through the resolutions and see the changes. Thank you. I hope you have a place or can tell me via email who to send all these errors to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do the city officials have any comment on who she should report?
Peggy, you can give that stuff to me. I can take that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Peggy.
Yeah, there's a lot of cleanup that we're trying to do in the general plan. Okay, we're closing out oral communications. There's some written communications that are in the minutes in the packet. Nothing on the consent calendar. Let's move to public hearings. Item number 3 use permit to allow the commercial parking and storage of vehicles in the parking lot of an existing retail center, also known as the Oaks. Application number U2019-05. Applicants Patrick Bum, Stonebrook Asset Management. Location 21269 Stevens Creek Boulevard. For those that are following, let's see where we are. Recommended action: Planning Commission find that the denial of the project is exempt from CEQA and deny the use permit, number 2, or Planning Commission decision final unless appealed. So let's start with the staff report. John?
Thank you, Chair. John Martier, Senior Planner, City of Cupertino's Community Development Department, and I'm the project planner for this use permit application, U2019-05, which is at the Oaks Retail Center at 21269 Stevens Creek Boulevard. Again, the project request is to approve a use permit to allow the commercial parking and storage of vehicles in the parking lot of an existing retail center, the Oaks. So the Oaks project site, as you see outlined in yellow, is approximately 8.1 acres as it currently is, as it currently stands. To the north, you have the Glenbrook Apartments. To the east, you have municipal uses such as Memorial Park over here and the Senior Center right there. To the south, the educational uses as the De Anza College. And just to the west, you have Highway 85. A little bit of background. Again, the Oaks Center is approximately 71,684 square feet. That's leased square footage, and on an 8.1 gross acre site. Currently, much of the shopping center is vacant, including the former Blue Light Cinema space. And since 2011, the site has hosted the West Coast Farmers Market every Sunday morning. The Auto Nation Dealership Group, as far as staff has known, since the spring of this year, has leased the offsite parking of approximately 165 vehicles on the western edge of the site, closest to Highway 85. According to the Cupertino Municipal Code, Chapter 1960, General Commercial CG Zones, that sort of use requires a use permit for commercial parking of vehicles. As you can see, that was part of the application. In the applicant's justification statement, the AutoNation parking is highlighted right here. If you can't see it, I will highlight it for you. So pretty much right here on the western edge of the property. Similar location as where the farmers market was approved to locate. So, with the parking, as this is a use permit for parking, the main analysis had to do with parking. So, staff analyzes the parking on the subject site in accordance with Chapter 19.124 parking regulations. When staff does analyze parking on any retail site or any site rather, we have to compare the supply and demand, assuming that the site is 100% occupied or at least available to be leased at 100% occupation, as we had done this site. The parking supply on site must meet current demand of the development and fully tenanted. And this is really to ensure that there are no adverse impacts, such as people just driving around in circles and circles looking for parking, forcing them to go out in the street and circle using the public right-of-way and whatnot. Those are just some examples of what sort of adverse impacts we're trying to avoid by ensuring that the supply on site meets the demand. So in our analysis, it was found that there are 593 stalls on site. What would be required if this was fully tenanted would be 496. So as it was designed, the site, you would have a surplus of 97 parking spaces. If you add the 165 that AutoNation is requesting or has requested or has actually parked on site, you find that after the proposed use, you have a negative 68 parking spaces on site for the demand that would be compared to the supply. What has the parking of this AutoNation Group's cars done in terms of the farmers market on site? So again, 2011, the Cupertino Farmers Market was allowed to operate every Sunday from 9 to 1. it was purposely approved to be located in the westerly edge of the parking aisles. Those at least 105 of those parking stalls for many reasons, as stated in the staff report. Those being that that's the part of the parking lot that's least likely to be used, particularly Sunday mornings. It's out of sight and out of mind of the residents that are located along Mary Avenue. It's close to 85. It allows for the least interruption to the internal circulation of the retail center. And last but not least, it's the part of the retail center that's actually kind of depressed. If you've ever been to the Oaks, you notice you have to actually drive down into the shopping center in terms of at least the western portion of it too. So as you're driving along Stevens Creek, it's a part of the shopping center that you're least likely to see, or at least have visibility of. So what has happened as the AutoNation cars been parked there has displaced the farmers market to be located closer to Mary Avenue, and which has caused the operation of the farmers market to actually be non-compliant with its approval. So the recommendation to the Planning Commission is that the Planning Commission adopt the proposed draft resolution to find that the denial of the project is exempt from CEQA and to deny the use permit as applied. Thank you. That completes my
And that's the conclusion of the staff report?
yes.
Okay. Question from the commissioners to staff? Commissioner Moore?
I'm just going to read something from the 2011, it's April 26, 2011 Planning Commission Staff Report. Just so we're on the same page here. They did a survey on Sundays. They studied the parking areas. During the surveyed hours, there was an average of 265 empty parking stalls in the surveyed shopping center parking areas, not including spaces that were occupied by existing tenants. The shopping center could accommodate the entire market area, 105 parking stalls, the vendor vehicles, 60 parking stalls, and the estimated parking demand from the additional retail customers, 45 parking stalls, and there would still be 55 empty parking stalls in the selected shopping center parking areas and 145 nearby Mary Avenue angular parking stalls. So if there was an average of 265 empty parking stalls, it seems as though this number would have been accommodated. So I'm wondering if they did any kind of survey recently.
Who's they?
The staff.
Okay.
Any survey of the recent parking situation
It's bad,
on site?
but I guess I would go back to the staff's point of it doesn't matter. The use is not the issue here in terms of the number of spaces that are being used as much as the number of spaces that are required. And I think the violation is in regard to the number of spaces that are required, correct? And the other element is making the farmer's market non-compliant by moving the farmer's market has definitely disrupted the area much more significantly than I live probably half a mile, 7/10 mile away. So I come down Mary Sunday mornings often. And the movement of the farmer's market from its old location, which was closer to a lot more parking along Mary and the diagonal spaces that were referenced,
Okay.
as well as the parking where the farmer's market currently is, was I would consider adequate to deal with the farmer market parking. When the Mercedes parking came into place and displaced the farmer's market to its current location, that parking was now consumed, and now the impact is, especially for Glenbrook, which I'm completely surprised is not here lodging a complaint about this, is very congested, where Glenbrook comes in and the entrance to the Oaks that's across from Glenbrook, that's now just a nightmare because of the fact that the farmer's market is essentially moved to that location or closer to that location and created what I would call a much less desirable outcome. I think when the farmer's market was proposed with regard to the CUP and the parking that you're referencing, one of the elements that the city, I was at that meeting because it was a relatively controversial topic, primarily because Glenbrook was very much against the farmer's market going in there. They felt that there would be trash, there would be porta potties, there would be noise. And so now it's actually much closer to Glenbrook than it was, so that's again why I'm surprised they're not here. But nonetheless, that where it was located then really capitalized on the flow of the parking, such that people parked just down further, and that intersection wasn't heavily utilized to the extent it is now. So if you go to the farmer's market now, especially in the 10, 11 o'clock time frame, that area is now very, very congested, which wasn't the case prior to this.
When you mean that area, you mean the Mary Avenue?
Yeah, the Mary
Okay,
Avenue.
just to be
yeah,
specific.
Right.
Okay.
I would also like to mention that I did speak to Mark Tersini, and I did go do a site visit, and I spoke to some of the tenants, and found, not on a Sunday, so I'm really grateful for hearing your comments about what actually goes on Sunday, because that's what I was really wondering about. During the week, it doesn't sound like it is so much of an issue. Okay, and it does sound like there is a problem with the De Anza students coming and trying to park on site during the week, but that was really all I heard negative about during the week. So I'm glad to hear some information about Sunday. I did indicate that I had done the SEAF run a few weeks ago, and there's several very commendable uses that have gone on the site. At the farmers market, for instance, is voluntary. It's a gift to the community, allowing it to be there. Monte Vista High School's been allowed to use it. Diwali Festival, Princess Project, Girl Scouts of America, Senator Bell car seat safety check event. So the owner has been very generous with the property. In seeing that it's only halfway, about half occupied right now, it seems as though it's freed up a lot of spaces. But I can see that the Sunday issue is pretty big, and I don't know how to square that circle.
Actually, I will echo Commissioner Moore's comments. I think the property owner, and I met Mr. Tersini last week also, has been very considerate of the community overall, whether it comes to allowing the farmer market to be there or allowing the use of the space. And I think anything except the Sunday, I think the current situation is fine. But I also agree with Commissioner Takahashi that on Sunday it gets bad. This weekend I had to go and park in the Memorial Park parking lot and then go there. Shane Company actually has put orange cones to prevent anybody coming and parking and occupying their lot. Getting out, I had to do a 3-point turn between a 2 set of cones. So yes, Sunday is pretty dangerous and bad out there. But the rest of the week is perfectly fine.
I do have a question regarding Municipal Code 1960.030, permitted conditional and excluded uses. It's use 22. What you're referencing is commercial parking and parking garages, and it requires a conditional use permit, which would be approved by the Planning Commission, which is us. So here, I'd like to have it clarified that for commercial parking, it seems as though this would ordinarily be referring to something a little bit different than what we're talking about here, which is basically renting the site. Would you, staff, comment on that, please?
Yeah, this is kind of an unusual type of use, and so we tried our best to give the applicant a process in which to have at least get an approval or denial, or at least have something to allow it on the site. So we spent some time looking through our ordinance, and we felt that this use fit best within that line item in the ordinance as a commercial. This is renting out space to an outside user, So we felt that interpretation-wise, this is a commercial parking use.
From a, oh, go ahead.
Well, does commercial parking ordinarily mean, you know, if you've got a parking meter, you have to pay to park? Is that
Or like a parking lot where you have to pay.
right? Is that
Like kind of
ordinarily
like, you know,
how
like
it
with
would
the
be?
tickets and all that kind of stuff.
Typically, yes.
I have a question though from a historical, oh, sorry. Here we go.
Okay.
I have a question from a historical perspective. I've seen these cars in other lots in the past. One of them was on the Valco site. How did we handle that, just from a historical perspective?
So from what I recall from that use, again, I wasn't involved in that situation. My understanding is that when Valco or Sandhill was approached to move the cars, they had to move them within a timely manner.
Okay.
So when I went on the site visit, I'd been informed of this previously, there are a lot of vehicles parked along Mary Avenue. Would you happen to know, just offhand, if that's being used for shuttle service for a tech company at this time, or was that something that happened a few months ago?
Speaking on the public right-of-way,
Yes, along
Yeah.
Mary Avenue, I'd heard that there were some tech buses that would go and pick up, employees from that location, and I believe that used to happen at Valco as well.
I'm not quite aware what the off-site parking spaces are used for. Is it within the realm of possibility that those are used as parking for bus pickup? Absolutely, but that's something that staff can look into further.
Commissioner
Again,
Takahashi.
since I'm
Since you
in the
live it.
neighborhood,
Do you have to
yes.
recuse yourself if you're in
During
the
no, because I'm
just
more
kidding,
than
I'm just kidding.
1,000 feet away.
I'm just kidding.
I did assess that, just so you know.
I know you did.
But yes, there is significant bus traffic and parking. So that's a weekday thing as well. So from the standpoint of, the Oaks demand on parking during the weekdays is minimal, right? They can support based on limited spaces because of the amount of vacancies in the shopping center. So it doesn't appear to have an impact there. The buses are mostly going up to the city, Genentech buses, and Salesforce.com buses, you name it. It's deemed a transit hub.
It's an official transit hub that we have?
Unofficial.
Can we count
transit
that
hub.
towards something?
Right.
Do you know if before the Mercedes?
Oh, this has been here a long time. Now, the transit's been there for 3-4 years now.
Was there any chance that they were parking on the Oaks beforehand, or have they
No,
always
I think
been on the
most
street?
of the people were pretty respectful of the Oaks parking lot. So, because there's so much parking on Mary. But what it did do was start to interfere with the dog park parking. And so what the city did there was put up limited hour parking right at the dog park so that there'd be spaces for people to park for the dog park. So that was kind of a conflict, if you will, of those spaces in terms of not allowing, essentially filling up all the dog parking spaces.
Well, I think this is getting a little bit off topic, but would you think that they should limit the time on Mary to, maybe 2 hours or 4 hours?
Well, if they did that, that would eliminate that. So that's really a broader discussion of transit and transportation, and I assume is not necessarily the scope of what we're trying to determine here, but it is a de facto
Going back
transit.
to something around scope, has staff done a study to say how many cars could be put there if we were to issue a conditional use permit? Is there a maximum number of cars on the parking lot that would actually allow them to fulfill any requirements?
Well, we do have, as noted in the staff report, there is, without the cars on site, there is a surplus of cars. So,
Right.
I mean,
So was a compromise solution discussed, for example, that would have, can you pull up the site, the plan view, the photo? Thanks. So a possible compromise would be allow either parking or the farmer's market to be in this area and the other to occupy the balance area. There would still be more demand on parking because those spaces would be consumed, but on the Sunday, the farmer's market parking probably goes, I don't know, maybe 20 spaces down, Mary.
Commissioner Takahashi, are you trying to mitigate the circulation and the flow?
No,
Mary?
mitigate the parking, and,
Mitigate
and,
parking,
and it's and
okay.
then it's overflow. What I was talking about earlier is the farmers market now is here,
Correct.
and the problem intersection is right here, because of Glenbrook coming out, and then lots of people trying to figure out where to park for the farmers market because of the location.
So when the farmers market
here,
was-
down here, people parked up here, and then in here. It didn't necessarily spill all the way back down, and this was all available parking. So,
And some people came out this way, out to this
right,
exit over there.
right. But it
So-
seems to me that there is potentially a compromise that fits in the parking standard and allows kind of return to the conditional use permit. But anyway, food for thought.
There is parking, it looks like on the west side of the Blue Light Cinemas building, which is not included in the AutoNation parking lease. So when I went out today, it looked as though the center island and the parking adjacent to the 85 were included, but those stalls were not. Could someone clarify that? Do I understand that correctly?
So to understand your question completely, so you have, if we look at the AutoNation, so you're referring to the AutoNation map, right? It's highlighted, correct, let me pull that up. And so you're inquiring why these aren't being used right here?
Well, I want to clarify that they're not being used, actually.
Correct. I think what you see over here on this map is consistent to what's actually on site. Since I've been on site, I think it's pretty consistent.
So you could foreseeably take the stalls on the north side there on Mary and then move them down adjacent to the Blue Light Cinemas building and free up those stalls.
I think there are two questions at one point when we do talk to the applicant who is in the room to understand how many cars that lease is supposed to handle and really what movements can be made around for the farmers market. I think those are probably two items so far I'm hearing from the commissioners.
I have a couple questions, but I think if there's an opportunity for the applicant to speak, I'll probably hold them until then.
Do we do that after, or we can bring them up now? Let's bring that up. Mr. Tersini, come up, I guess. Hold on,
Tersini.
start again. There you go.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mark Tersini, KT Urban. Patrick Bum is with me this evening, and Patrick is our property manager, not only for this property, but other properties that we're involved with. But I wanted to come up and introduce myself to the Planning Commission. I haven't had an opportunity to speak to the Planning Commission. I have been in front of the City Council on a couple of occasions prior to our ownership of the center, as they were evaluating a general plan amendment, and then subsequently after our acquisition of the property. KT Urban is owned by my brother and myself, and when we purchased the property, it was not a listed site. It was a privately held property, and the prior ownership were not developers, but they did understand that in order to provide greater flexibility for someone that wants to come in and acquire an older shopping center, they did a very good job on keeping the leases to short term as much as they could, but keeping the occupancy as high as they could as well. Since our acquisition of the property, that has been our goal. We have spent time meeting with each tenant and trying to find out what their business plans were, how are they operating today, what happens if we were to build a new mixed-use project and provide for retail, would that fit into their business plan? Up to including talking to a movie theater operator that actually operates the Pruneyard theaters, as whether or not, even on an interim basis, could they come in and run that theater and then be repurposed into a new mixed-use project. I didn't talk about the prior theater operator served us a notice of wishing to depart the center. We've had other notices from tenants even after making adjustments to their rent, given the condition of the property and our time frame of which we intend to develop the site. So right now we're sort of in this interesting period of time. I as of this morning, looked at a staff email to the environmental consultant looking at when do we expect the environmental review to be reviewed by the city staff and then circulated for public circulation. And then when would that get us to a planning commission and city council hearing on a pending application? Right now, it looks as if we'll be in front of the planning commission in the February timeframe of 2020, and potentially city council February, most likely will move to the March timeframe. So I give you that background because I'm trying to understand this is just an interim use. It isn't a make or break. I know we sent a letter to the city manager and to staff addressing the very issues that we have accommodated. We inherited the farmers market. We were not aware that it was a specifically designated area. That information was never communicated to us by the seller. That happens sometimes, but we're aware of it now. So if it's the purview of the Planning Commission this evening to disregard a conditional use permit for this period of time, life will go on. The farmers market has been something that has been in discussion, and more recently because there has been some placement of fruits and vegetables in a compactor that wasn't their use, and caused quite a bit of costs incurred by myself and my brother in the ownership of the center. So we're addressing that, but that's a separate issue. We can look at continuing, and if we continue the farmers market, we'll have conversations with the farmers market. We did have conversations with the city manager. Is this the best place for the farmers market, for the future? And is there a better location for it? And I think that's something that should be analyzed. We're not going to be offended by it because we don't receive any funds from them. But I want to wrap up my comments here, and that is, and provide Patrick any opportunity to address the comments that you have with respect to the parking and how we have laid it out. It was laid out with the idea that we wanted to not impact the existing tenancy that we do have, and we do have nail salon and others that are along the Mary Avenue, and the Dance Academy has been supportive of that. So communication has been made to our current tenancy. We're looking at the opportunity to have a month-to-month basis to provide some additional revenue for the center to allow us to keep up and maintain the center. If it goes away, it goes away. I do believe we're going to be in front of the Planning Commission and look forward to moving forward and redeveloping the property. So I'll leave my comments at that and available for any questions.
Yeah. Real quick question, though. You said something earlier. Do you charge the farmers market any fees for being there?
We do not, no.
So there's no rental fees? No, they just show up and there's a...
That's correct. Patrick does interface with the farmers market and helps coordinate keeping the parking. And parking for Shane Company is cordoned off like that because under their lease term, that is their exclusive parking. So they have their own security. Patrick provides additional security when we have SEAF runs and other venues that may not be aware of that, parking to keep those cars out of that parking area. But right now, Shane Company is on we just actually extended for a few more months because they had a desire to stay for a few, but they have been on a month-to-month and will be vacating shortly.
And how long is the lease with AutoNation at the moment?
It is just done on a month-to-month basis.
It's a month-to-month basis?
That's correct. And so I was thinking about when I heard the comment with respect to not having we're not 100% parked, but if we were to have someone come and approach us and say, hey, I can use that space on an interim basis, it takes at least 30 months to draft a lease and get them in position. So that would be a management decision to terminate the AutoNation lease and put somebody else in there. So there is opportunity. So it's not precluding us from it, but we're not actively out seeking lease because everybody asks, how long can I have? And I don't know. I thought when we acquired the property some 5 years ago, we wouldn't be having this conversation, but I am, but I think we're rounding the corner. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I had a question. So maybe this is a little bit to staff as well. When we discuss commercial parking, I think that would normally be a pay lot for cars that are coming. So I just want to confirm, there's no traffic really generated by the cars that are parked there.
That is correct, no.
Okay,
Mhm.
great, thank you.
Related to Commissioner Fung's question there, do people just drive the cars there, or do they just bring in the trucks and drop them off?
No, what I've observed, and Patrick will address it, I've seen young men and women driving the single car over with somebody in the car, and then they'll take one back.
Okay,
Yeah.
good to know.
Thank you.
Commissioner Moore?
Well, before you had the Mercedes vehicles there, did you have any nuisance issues with that area being open, people coming to park in it?
Yes, we've seen that. In fact, Patrick mentioned to me that the Dance Academy has been pleased with having cars in that location because it has prevented folks from parking vehicles that are more on a longer-term basis, which sometimes is a little uncomfortable. We also have had vagrants that have been on site. But I want to answer your question too with respect to the parking on Mary Avenue for the techs. The tech users have been out there. Sometimes they use our lot as their three-point turnaround. I see the three-point turnaround a lot in the right in Mary, which was interesting to me, during the commute hours. So for the 4 hours that the farmers market is being used on Sunday in that traffic condition, I don't know how it offsets with that. We're not big stickler. I mean, personally, if they're going to make the swing, make the swing. Do we want parking there that is not associated with it? And I agree. There could be a time limit on parking on Marion Avenue that would move people along. So there's a lot of different things that can go on. And as I say, we have a property that we'd like to develop. So this was just an interim use for us. Thank you.
Commissioner Fung?
Yeah, just to clarify, you were talking about making three-point turns. You're talking about the buses.
I am.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Takahashi, you good? Okay. Just a question general to staff. I've noticed a lot of tour bus operators out of the marina parking lot. How does that work? Is there any specific use for that, or do we issue a permit for that? Just in tangential? Like they end up parking, they take up like the other half of the lot that's south of, closer towards Stevens Creek when they park. So is there anything related to that? Because someone must be asking for permission for these guys to, or maybe they're not. We'll find out.
If you can get more specific.
So basically what happens is like there's these tour operators that leave from Marina Foods, the shopping center, and people park their cars there and get onto these buses and go on 7-day trips, like, go see Yellowstone or go see like Yosemite, right? And then they come back and they just leave their cars there, like for more than your normal usage of that. I'm not sure if someone's paid to do that, like the tour operators pay them to do it, if there's just like a joint agreement or there's just a handshake. I'm just trying to understand, like, is that something that's permitted right now? I'm trying to say it's codified anywhere.
Yeah, it's interesting because we could view that as a temporary type of parking situation where someone's there for 24 hours and leaves. It's a private lot, but we can look into it. If it becomes more of an issue with nuisance and whatnot, that's something we can definitely look further into. I haven't noticed anything personally, but, we'll keep an eye out on it.
Oh, I'm not making a complaint. I'm just saying, I'm not making a complaint at all. I'm just saying that, I'm just trying to understand the usage, right? And if we issue a conditional use for this, right, it's just for the parking of cars. I just want to make sure that it's really specific as to what that's for. It doesn't extend to any other uses like that where people temporarily park there or can pay to park there.
Right. Again, I think the difference between this one and what you're describing is this is more of a permanent basis where there's, a designated area. It's not 24 hours or 48 hours. This is for 6 months that you have cars there on maybe on a rotating basis. I don't know how that operates, but it's
Hopefully, someone's selling the cars. Otherwise,
Yeah.
that's a lot of inventory to carry.
So just, I know we probably should actually go to the public comment, but in a private parking lot, there's no regulations about how long somebody may park, or are there? I don't know. If the owner of Marina said, I don't care if people park here for 4 days, I know that on public streets, there's a 3-day limit.
I think for community development department, we'd be looking at that as a land use issue,
Okay.
right? As opposed to parking regulation. It is a parking lot.
I have.
Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner
Okay.
Moore.
Could we bring up this table and perhaps let I believe it's from the owner
And put it on the
and have them
overhead.
speak to it?
The electronic.
So this
Yes.
was
It's
in our
it's the-
packet,
It's in the
It's in the
packet.
report, yeah.
It's in the packet.
and I was hoping, since I believe it's from the owner, if you'd like to comment on it?
And yeah, and just introduce yourself as well, since you're first time up here for today.
Good evening. My name's Patrick Bum. I'm the property manager for the Oak Shopping Center. I've been such for approximately 4 years. I work for Stonebrook Asset Management.
Okay, so did you generate this chart?
I did.
Okay, would you like to talk about it?
I think just from a basic standpoint, the calculation is such that it takes into consideration vacancies throughout the shopping center. I don't have an exact amount of what the percentage is of the shopping center that is currently vacant. I believe by last number, it was about 40% vacant. So this spreadsheet indicates just the number of parking stalls throughout the shopping center, and as well as the requirement based on the tenants and the spaces that are vacant versus those that are occupied.
Can staff verify that the total parking stalls, the 593 is the same as what the city has?
yes, verified.
So we have just a little bit over 52% of the parking stalls available at this moment. How many are occupied by the AutoNation lease?
165.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any other comments from the commissioners, questions? We're going to move to public comment. Okay, let's move to public comment. First one here, Peggy Griffin.
Commissioner, staff, I want to thank the staff for the report. It had all the details. You could look at all the different codes and stuff like that. Anyway, I support the staff recommendation to deny the use permit. I think that it's against the uses intended. It sets a precedent for other property owners along Stevens Creek Boulevard, and it encourages property owners to disregard the intent of the heart of the city and our zoning and request whatever uses they can come up with. I know that parking has been, you see it along Stevens Creek, particularly in Santa Clara, San Jose, but it's not a car retail shop, it's parking cars. The other thing that I want to bring to your attention is page 4 of the Heart of the City.
Let's put that up.
Yeah, okay. It says the specific plan is a development guidance for the most important commercial corridor in the city. The overall goal is to develop a collection of pedestrian-inclusive gathering places that will create a positive and memorable experience for residents and visitors. I think that if you set this precedent, then all along Stevens Creek, as things develop, that It also can prolong the development of a site if income is coming in and it's not just vacant. So I encourage you to deny the use permit. Thank you.
Okay, Rahul, Vasant, please come to the dais. If you've got any comment cards, please fill them out, and you have 3 minutes.
Greetings, honorable commissioners. I am representing only myself. I want to echo the sentiments of the previous resident that spoke involving parking, particularly because a lot of cities like San Jose, San Francisco, to an extent Fremont, it's very difficult to get parking. It costs significant fees, and this really hits our most vulnerable who have difficulty paying for these fees. We also have a greater number of individuals with developmental disabilities in our community, and I think this parking is very important because at De Anza College, they're actually planning on expanding some developments. We could see the parking capacity at De Anza College reduced. If we look at events like the Cherry Blossom Festival, the parking is full all throughout. So I am kind of curious what would happen to these larger scale events. There is actually a slight issue as far as these cars that are parked. Yes, people aren't coming in and out, and it may not be generating traffic, but it does generate a safety hazard or violation. When we have a bunch of very expensive cars parked in this area, which is right nearby a senior center, as well as a park. Memorial Park, for that matter, is going to be developed. It's going to be, or not developed, but we're going to be seeing some changes there. It's a highly populated, highly used park. We're going to be seeing big changes at De Anza College. We might be seeing changes with the senior center and that aside, I think that a study session should be held to examine the impacts of these changes. I think that we should also have a study session on the impact of any new state bills that are passed. How is that going to alter what's happening here, as well as recently at the ABAG MTC Executive Board meeting, they approved an in-house methodology, which essentially Plan Bay Area 2050, I won't get into the details, but that's also something that should be studied. The farmers market is just not working at Mary. During the Ride for Diabetes event, I actually had two friends that were going to be coming down. They came down to visit. They told me that for 20 minutes they drove around, they couldn't find parking, and it's actually really unsafe. I think that the farmers market thrives much better by 85. There's a report from, I think, someone who sent in a page, might have spoken earlier before me, that they donated to Jim Bell's office, Rokana's office, Girl Scouts for America. I'd really like to see the numbers. Potentially, could I say, I might have donated $3 to Rokana's campaign. I don't know if I split a contribution or not, but maybe that might exempt me from a parking fee. That was just a joke, but thanks so much.
Thank you, Rahul. Jennifer Griffin.
Good evening, Planning Commission. I just wanted to ask a question about the nature of AutoNation. I'm very, very familiar. I mean, we bought 2 cars from Hertz on Stevens Creek Boulevard. Yes, we bought our cars locally. And they had their cars stored on site. I had actually looked at other cars on lots across the street. I went up and down San Jose, Santa Clara, Stevens Creek Auto Row. And I think there's stuff parked on Kylie. Ford's got stuff parked around there. I mean, we looked for a while, and we finally bought from Hertz. So I'm a little bit confused about what AutoNation is doing. Are they one of these newer types where you go on the internet and say, I want this type of a car model, and then the car is either delivered to your driveway or is the parking lot being used for long-term storage of cars for Stevens Creek Boulevard dealerships? as I have seen, there are other areas where people do, they actually stored some of those cars at Valco at one point. We won't get into that. But I'm just curious, what exactly is the nature of how AutoNation does their business? Why are people, it sounded like people were driving their cars to the Oak Shopping Center and then taking cars off the lot without any type of official capacity. So that again, if that's what's actually happening, you are setting up some issues in terms of safety. If these are high-end cars and they're out there at 1 o'clock in the morning, you could have people doing random mischief, stealing tires, causing graffiti problems. So if you could talk a little bit about how AutoNation, what is their marketing model, and are they different than what goes on Stevens Creek Boulevard? Thank you.
I guess it's a question directed to the property owner, but I can quickly answer that. AutoNation is not a Carvana where you order online and the car gets delivered, but I'll let you come up and say that.
Thank you. While I'm not an employee of AutoNation, I do know, because I have purchased vehicles through AutoNation before, to your point, that it is a traditional dealership just like any other dealership located up and down Stevens Creek, where it's actually the folks that are coming to the site are actually employees of AutoNation and Mercedes Stevens Creek, who come, once they have vacancy in their lot, come and refill a portion of the lot that they have on Stevens Creek. And to the question of, can I address a former question?
Yeah, please go ahead.
From the other gentleman? The contributions that were made on behalf of ownership and the Oak Shopping Center were made as gestures of facilitating those events. There was no monetary contribution that was made on ownership's behalf. And so I wanted to clarify that there was no money being exchanged.
While you're up there, I do have a question. Has there been any issues with vandalism or crime with the cars being up there?
Quite the opposite. Speaking with one of the tenants at the shopping center, they had actually expressed a sense of relief in that the buses that were driving through the shopping center at one point, we did our best to try to mitigate them passing through the shopping center because it is a safety concern. But the Dance Academy has informed me that buses no longer drive through the shopping center and endanger children who are coming to and from vehicles being dropped off for the classes that take place in the evening.
Okay. Does the rental agreement with AutoNation have a certain limit of the number of cars that can be parked there?
It does, 165.
So 165 is the
Correct.
cap?
When we were approached by AutoNation initially, they had actually asked for 400 parking stalls. And so we discussed internally, did some calculations, and really dialed that number back to 165, which was, again, their hope was for 400, but based on our analysis, we could comfortably allocate the spots at 165 vehicles.
And today, another different question, different line of questioning here. When there are city events that are going on, are people allowed to park in the Oaks for city events? Or is that, because I usually see security guards there, and I wasn't curious.
We have a responsibility with Shane Company to allocate a portion of the parking lot.
So there are 38 lots. There's 38 spaces.
38 stalls, correct. Technically, if there are patrons of the events that are taking place at Memorial Park, if they are parking on site, we try to be a good neighbor. Just as long as there is not a large impact to the businesses as well as to the community surrounding the area, we do our best to accommodate some of that.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. Any other questions from the commissioners?
Were there any more speaker cards?
I don't see any more.
Okay, so if you could stay for a second.
Yes, sir.
I just want to address a couple things that come up in the public comment. The first was, this is a private lot, so, if there are issues that De Anza has or that, or related to to Mary Avenue, those are not your issue, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then the second question is about valuation. There was a question raised about, what is the value of some of the community and, some political activities as well. And so it was clear there was no money exchange there. But I'm curious whether there's not all farmers markets are probably operating rent-free. So I'm curious if there's even just an approximate value of what typically, is there a monetary value for the use of the site?
I don't think I can answer that question with any degree of certainty. Being that the farmers market operates on an interim basis only at a certain period within the week, it would be hard to come up with a number. I would certainly estimate in the thousands.
What's your rent at the moment for the space per square foot per year? How much is rent? Is it like, are we renting, as a commercial resident, like not a stall space, but someone that's actually renting a Class B retail space?
We're currently not marketing space, just with the long-term intentions that we do have. I would...
Are we like $20 a square feet, $30?
On a per square foot per month basis, I would estimate somewhere between, on the current...
$2.25.
No, it'd be about at least $4 a square foot.
Okay.
Triple net, which...
Triple net 4, got it, okay.
Probably more.
Probably more, so we're sitting around 48 to 50 a year, okay. All right, any other questions?
Yeah, I mean, in reference to we have an owner that definitely has done a lot for the community. I think that's important, and has future plans for the site that I think the city is aligned with. And this is kind of we'll just call it an afterthought or something along those lines. As a property manager, is it, and are you open to some level of compromise from the standpoint of space reductions for lease to the AutoNation and relocation of the farmers market to, because as it stands from an all or nothing perspective, which is what's in front of us right now, I would be aligned with the staff recommendation to deny the application. However, if city staff were to work a little more in terms of fitting things a little more where the farmers market, or if not where it was, at least farther away from the Glenbrook, that entrance, and then there would be somewhat less loss of spaces, if you will, by reducing the number of spaces for AutoNation. Seems to me there's a compromise that could work for everybody, and from my perspective, I believe that compromise is a good thing, generally speaking. So that's my question: is that something that you would entertain as the property manager?
Yes.
Okay.
I haven't spoken to Mark about that, but I'm almost positive that
Right. Okay.
we would certainly be open to that.
Can we pull up a map again of the property in question here? So, because it sounds like there are a couple things here that Commissioner Takahashi you're referring to. One is, and there are a couple of things that it sounds like the property owner is mentioning, that in this area over here, if there were enough cars sitting around in this area, you'd keep the buses from coming through. Is that correct, if you're looking at this? Right, this area is basically, people are cutting through.
Yes, and as a matter of fact, to answer your question, we really saw that was a major problem. The problem is that it's difficult for them with all of those vehicles stacked all the way to Stevens Creek for the bus to turn around effectively. What we actually did see, in addition to that, was vehicles entering from the east, closer to Shane Company, and actually driving through the parking lot and endanger, yes, exactly, and raising concern about the safety of the children at the dance academy.
And today, and today the farmers market, from what I remember, and I did have a chance to speak to Mr. Tersini on Sunday, is basically picking up this spot, or actually it stops about here. Is that correct?
No, it's the entire, it's that.
It's this whole
entire-
area here that we're
Yes, it
coloring
is.
out here.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. And when it was over on this side, how much space did that take? Commissioner Takahashi, maybe you have a better feel for that.
I mean, it was dynamic. It started out as a larger space, and I think the farmer's market decided to move the vendors closer to each other to feel higher density of people, and it is very popular. And so I think it changed over the course of
I
time.
attended fairly regularly. I think that it was kind of like
Right.
this area.
Yeah, it's just that part.
So it was toward the back, very close to the
Right.
the parking entrance.
Right.
Okay, and the question here, maybe for staff, is if you kept the farmer's market here and you left the parking here and here for the 165 cars,
Except I think there's an issue with the tenants parking here because there are
Those are live tenants
there's
at the
active
moment.
retail right there. right?
There's active
Right,
retail.
You're getting into Dance Academy,
Right.
and they,
Yeah.
they need the pickup
Right.
and drop off, and.
There's a restaurant,
Yes.
Enzo's is right there.
Okay. Okay, interesting. So, interesting.
And I would assume that AutoNation has some level of concern of proximity to a lot of public activity. In other words, I wouldn't foresee them wanting their cars right adjacent to, like right next to where there's a lot of people, just from the standpoint of
They
the-
like the visibility.
Oh, really? Oh, so they might not have too big of an issue with kind of a
I asked the
free
same.
free advertising.
I asked the same question.
Interesting. Okay.
Oh, Commissioner Saxena, go ahead.
Right now, do they have any way of, by which you cordon off the area where they're parking, or you just walk into the lot where the cars are parked?
Currently, there are no barriers, barricades. I've worked closely with Kevin, the general manager at AutoNation, to make sure that they do keep to those 165 spots. And so there's nothing, there's no fencing, barricades, anything like that prevents people from going into that portion of the lot.
Yeah, if you did put fence, it would probably open up a huge can of worms in terms of access, egress, emergencies, and all of those elements.
No, agree. Question for staff. Have we done any type of these conditional use permits for any other areas? And are there any other properties in Cupertino that could handle more than 100 cars or 50 cars to store at this moment?
To my knowledge, we've never done a CUP for a parking situation like this. This would be probably the first that I would know. And to your second question, I don't believe so. I think Valco will be the only other one, and that's probably not going to happen. So.
Okay, good to know.
One thing that I find a little bit difficult while we're trying to look at relocating the parking is that I don't have a count on each of these strips of parking in order to make some kind of determination of how you could relocate it. We're also, again, leaving out the parking that's on the west side of the Blue Light Cinemas, which they're currently not using. When I looked at it today, there are a few ADA stalls in that area which you would not want to take up with a stored vehicle. You wouldn't be able to, actually. But there were several. You can see there's some diagonal parking on the south side of that strip, which you could foreseeably relocate some cars to. So I think, before we start, if we're going to entertain the idea of relocating their vehicles, we need to know what these counts are in these strips.
Yeah, I guess my intent wasn't that we would actually debate the ideal location as much as have staff work with the applicant and come back with a revised CUP that then we can critique, if you will, as a commission. But otherwise, yeah, it would be, I don't know, the staff would have more time and it wouldn't be necessarily taking up everybody's valuable time.
A question to the applicant. I know this is conditional on the city making approvals for the land and the redevelopment. How many months do you think this is going to take, or that you'll be leasing this out to AutoNation if we're to continue at a minimum level? Oh, in your best, I mean, I'm sure you want to break ground right away. I totally get it. But I'm saying, like, like, what are we talking about? Is it 6 months? Are we talking 12 months
I would
out?
say between 6 months and 1 year is, I think, our timeline, again, crossing fingers from a development standpoint. That would be my best guess.
Okay.
I have to say that I am bothered that the municipal code 19.60.030 is not adequately covering leased parking uses, and I am not in full agreement that commercial parking means leasing space to store vehicles. And this is actually more of a municipal code issue, and I feel like we're really stretching the definition of commercial parking. So I'm not entirely sure that we are authorized as the Planning Commission to approve a conditional use permit for leasing the space. I think that gets into kind of a legal question, and, you know.
If that should be the case, Commissioner Moore, would that then mean that this body doesn't necessarily have jurisdiction over this issue to begin with? The city does, but then the question is who brings it up?
It's a question for our attorney.
We'll pass it on to you.
Given that there appears to be no other category, unless you are recommending one, Commissioner Moore, that this would fall under, and this is a novel situation for the staff and the commission to address, it's fine to discuss this tonight. It sounds like it's going to go back to staff. I don't know if I'm jumping ahead here, and we can look at that issue further once we do that.
I think it is a new category. I think it sits in an area where you've got, you know, bus and RV storage and car storage, and there might actually be, you know, residents who want to have that type of use in the city somewhere. So I do think it is something new, and it is a little bit different from, you know, what we're talking about, which is commercial use, just, you know, paying to park a car.
Yeah, actually, this whole question about residents needing to park anywhere, if what we're seeing coming down from Sacramento about new construction, which doesn't even need to have parking allocated. So we might have even a greater need for residents to go and park the car like half a mile or a mile away, because that's the only lot they have to park, like for a few days or whatever. This is similar to what's happening here about a dealer parking the car for a few days till they move the.
But this is a
things.
private lot, right?
Yeah,
This is
but
a private lot, so.
it could also be a private lot which is providing that parking, that, you know, people really have weekend cars and then they they go to the weekend, take the car out and go. So
Well, you're saying that that could be eventually become I don't think we're talking about it being a commercial parking lot today,
yeah,
but you're suggesting that we may run out of space at some point.
yes, or this whole model of longer term parking by people in a particular lot, which is not like you go in and go out, but the more of a longer term parking
But
is
this-
not going to be uncommon in the future.
But this
May not be
conditional use
uncommon.
permit doesn't cover that, right? It's just really about the specific usage for the leasing for this specific example.
Yes, I know,
Okay,
but
okay,
like
so make
if
sure.
what Commissioner Moore's point about which category this even belongs to.
So just thinking out loud, to Commissioner Sexton's point, I think the intent, or the visionaries, if you will, from a planning standpoint, is that transportation advancements in technology reduce the dependency on automobiles, thus reducing parking, and that there's more point-to-point and on-demand vehicles. That's the vision, if you will, that drives that. But I guess what I wanted to throw out there is, just as we try to think this through, or what are the ramifications of what we're discussing, I think when we talk about vehicle storage and then storage companies, right, that those, they have RV storage, you pay to park there. I don't think collectively, and I'm speaking for myself, I don't see a situation where I would support a private property that is not designated for storage, saying, hey, I've got all these unused spaces, you know what, I'm gonna rent it out to RVs, and now you have kind of this RV storage occurring. So it's not, it would be somewhat unsightly and not necessarily run through a permit process that we're trying to maintain. They would have to come to us for a use permit. I think we would not necessarily want to allow something like that unless it were visible to nobody. This is a little more visible. So I just think we have to be kind of think that through from the standpoint of how this, because I think we're somewhat setting precedents if approving a CUP for private parking, if you parking storage, whatever we want to call it, and just have to kind of be mindful of what does that mean and just think it through. That's my point.
Commissioner Moore.
Do we have a land use designation? Do we have zoning for storing vehicles, be it RV storage or a car or a boat, something like that?
I think it's a question directed to staff, yeah.
Yes, we do.
And what is that?
That's section 19.60.030, line item 36, under storage garages.
So that's a form of general commercial, right?
It's general commercial.
That's, yes,
That's
correct.
general
Okay.
commercial. 1960 is the general commercial code. Municipal code.
Well, so I have a couple questions for staff here. So first of all, the current plan for Westport, the redevelopment at this site has been, when was that accepted in for review by the planning department?
I want to say it's spring of 2018.
Yeah, you can chime in if you like, but, okay. And then, I'm curious if what the city's policy is in with regard to properties that are in, kind of a transitional state. Now, there are going to be different states where it may be operating, partially operating as it is here. Are there policies around that?
The main one is that we're treating this as two separate applications. So, I mean, although we do know there is a larger application for the complete redevelopment of the site, we have to treat it differently. I mean, what's to say that Mr. Tersini and KT Urban says, you know what, we're going to drop our application next week. There's not going to be any redevelopment of the site. I found a movie theater tenant's going to redevelop the site himself, and we're going to have a new movie theater and stuff. So we have to expect the unknowns, even though it could be 85 to 90% possibility that this is going to be redeveloped in the next few years. But we do have to treat it as two separate applications and two separate scenarios.
What's the time limit on the current proposal for the conditional use permit? Is it a month? Is it 12 months? Is it 18? Or we have to set that as well?
The Westport development?
No, the conditional use permit for parking lease, the lease for the vehicles.
It would be permanent.
Oh, okay.
It's a use permit, so
It's open-ended.
open, yeah.
It runs with the land.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, okay, so I'm curious, what are the requirements where the information we got here, the center is currently 40% of the leasable space is operating and 60% is closed. If they were to close it down 100%, what does the parking, to kind of extend from what you were saying here, if it were to be closed 100%, would they still maintain the requirement, the full requirement for parking, even though there was no operation?
If the buildings are still standing, we can assume that it could be re-tenanted. I mean, that's how we would view it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's all the questions I have around that. I'll come back with comments later. Should I just keep going?
Just keep going.
Okay.
Go for
Well,
it.
so the comments, I think the comments I had here were that, let me ask, there was actually one other comment. I'm curious, there was concerns expressed about the farmer's market that is actually separate from the conditional use permit here. I would characterize the Friday farmer's market at Creekside Park as being very busy as well. Are there issues there? I don't know. I want to try to have the complaint levels, or I know there were complaints about the Creekside Park when it moved initially for some time. I'm curious what the complaint levels are, one versus the other.
None as a use, none. I think the complaint levels for the west side farmer's market, the one we're talking about now at the Oaks, is just basically a traffic that's spilling on over the Mary and the unsafe conditions. But as a use itself, nothing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that there was the concern on the, I'm not sure if it's actually, the entrance to Creekside Park, that there were concerns about traffic there as well, at the time when that first opened. I guess, so I did want to come around and talk about a couple of comments. So I am a fairly regular user of the farmer's market. And so I definitely see, traffic is crazy. I would actually say there were times before, I think it is worse in the kind of choke area than it was in the prior location, but it was definitely noticeably higher then as well. I guess, let's see. So in consideration, for me, in consideration of the kind of big picture overall, if the city policy is truly so strict that the current level of use is not consideration, I believe that the owner has been mindful about trying to scale the parking operation appropriately. If the city really has no flexibility with regard to the level of use of the shopping center, the current level of use of the shopping center, or the fact that it's been in state of application for over a year, for a redevelopment consideration, then I would kind of agree with Commissioner Takahashi that we probably should deny this permit. However, I also would be open to, if there's an opportunity, and I think there probably would be, if there's an opportunity to try to find a position and a mix of cars that will work better in that location. I would certainly recognize there's value to the community from the presence of the farmers market. So I would hope that there would be a way to do that, and I would also recommend that be something that we would send back to for staff to work out with the owners, and hopefully we can come back and approve something.
Commissioner Moore.
Okay, so I went and referenced Municipal Code 19.60.030, item 36, and it says storage garages and other wholesale businesses except computer hardware and software and communications businesses for which the city may generate sales tax revenue where the primary activity is to conduct sales and services to other businesses rather than to direct retail customers, and the code is EX, which means excluded uses. So when it says storage garages, what does that mean exactly?
Our thought was that the storage garage facilitated something more like a private person, rather than go into a building and have almost like a storage locker. So you have a storage facility instead of just putting your furniture in there or clothing that you're
Like a public storage?
Yeah, but for cars.
For cars, yeah.
That's what we envision more with the storage garage. Garage, insinuates something that's physical. It's a physical building. It's something that's visible. It's 1 to 2 stories tall. You drive in and whatnot.
Question to the city attorney. How do you put a time limit on a conditional use permit? Is there any way to do that?
Well, one question would be if the city has another form of permit that's a temporary permit. Sounds like there may be.
Yeah, we do have a temporary use permit process, but
Well, just to clarify this, if we're calling this a storage garage, it's excluded. Do I understand that correctly? That this isn't even an option to have a conditional use permit. If we find that it doesn't actually fit in item 22, commercial parking and parking garages, and it more suitably is within item 36 for storage garages, then this isn't up for discussion, if I'm understanding that correctly, and perhaps there needs to be another definition added to this table. And
Which is why we recommend line number 22, which is commercial parking. There's also line number 34, it talks about other commercial uses that in the planning commission's opinion is consistent with the characteristics of a general commercial zone. So those are 2 potential line items.
Okay, so we would have to find that having vehicles stored are within the character of general commercial.
Line item 34, correct?
For 34, right.
Or line item 22, which just talks about commercial parking.
Okay, so to clarify further, we have three options. We can go with 22 and put it under commercial parking. 34, other commercial uses in the character of general commercial. Or 36, under storage garages, which seems to be interpreted as having an actual structure.
I believe 36 is an actual structure, from what I can tell, if I remember. And so I think you're down to 22, and what's the other one here?
34.
34.
Right, and I have issue with if it's consistent with the character of general commercial. I think if you brought that to the public for a discussion, that I don't think a storage yard would be met with positive reviews.
Any other comments from commissioners? Commissioner Takahashi, you were proposing a send back to staff and you're talking out loud, you're formulating an idea to think about what that would look like in terms of a resolution that would address a couple requirements. I believe one was mitigating the traffic on Mary. I believe the other one was finding a way to resolve the number of cars or where the cars are placed to address that issue. And I was looking at if there was a time use, instead of a conditional use permit, a temporary use that would not set a precedent, but would allow 12 months, which would then help fund some of the activities that are being generated for community, which include the farmers market, include the security and the staff there. Are you along the same lines of thinking?
Yes, I am. I think, and I don't think it's been discussed, which I think is a positive, is a stance from the property owner that, well, I don't see a benefit and therefore would not support the farmers market moving forward, because I think generally the public feels that's a significant community benefit. So I don't want to create a demand or a situation where that is something that is even being considered. So that's why I think coming up with a solution that does allow some use for the property owner to generate some revenue in this interim period, whether or not it needs to be some kind of temporary use, or it can be approved as a regular CUP, given we know what the long-term plans are. It does change the whole structure of the land. It changes everything associated with the lot and available space. And I guess like a question for staff, in that particular case, when the configuration of the site changes dramatically and there is a existing CUP, for example, the farmers market that was in Valco, right? There's a hotel there now, and that was relocated. How does that CUP die, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, let's say the hotel site to gut themselves, which sounds really unlikely, but they wanted to just be a farmer's market there or be a parking lot. They could still do that technically, right?
Well, if it's so, when a CUP is not used for, I believe, 6 months, the CUP dies off.
Oh, it does die off.
Yeah, I think it could be 6 months or a year. I could look into it. So, for example, if it's not used for a time limit of either 6 months or a year, it dies off.
I personally would prefer a temporary use permit because probably CUP might end up setting some form of precedence, and this is a special situation, and we should treat it accordingly.
I have a question. I have a question for staff, as well as for the applicant. Like, how long did it take them to apply for and get to this point for the conditional use permit? What was the time frame?
I believe it was a few months. Okay, going back and forth.
This actually didn't follow what I would consider an ordinary process. So they ordinarily would have gone to the city and applied for the conditional use permit, but instead it was more, it arose a different way? Okay.
It came down from code enforcement, is that correct?
But that is common, right? Conditional use permit often comes as a result of a violation of, intentional or unintentional.
Not all conditional use permits, but yeah. I think in certain circumstances, yeah. I mean, a lot of people do ask for forgiveness rather than permission. So.
Okay, so I'm looking at this page 4 of 5 of the report. The city has 60 days until October 22nd to make a decision on the project. Now, if we needed to amend the municipal code in order to add a new line item, and then perhaps have it be, for instance, if you wanted to have allow a 1-year temporary use of vehicle storage for sites which are in the situation where it's going to be redeveloped, it's anticipated to be redeveloped. Is that something do we have time even to meet the October 22nd deadline?
So that reference in the staff report is to the Permit Streamlining Act, and that is with regard to the project that's before you tonight. But it sounds like if we're going to have staff revise the project, something new will be before you, and you wouldn't be bound by that timeline, assuming the applicant and everyone agrees that that's the path forward.
Okay. So could you describe how that could happen then, a little bit more, like what the timeline would look like? Because we would need to amend the municipal code, and then, so we're on no clock at all?
Is that a definite action that the municipal code needs amendment? Or I think the action was for staff and legal to make that determination.
Right, I don't believe the proposal, or the potential proposal here is a code amendment. I don't think this necessarily needs a code amendment. So if we're talking about Streamlining Act and how this will apply if we were to continue this item for a future time, I believe the advice from legal is that as long as it allows the applicant and the city staff to continue working on a project, that the Streamlining Act would still be in compliant. So that wouldn't be a necessary issue, and the staff be happy to work with the applicant. We haven't had that opportunity prior, but with the applicant as well as the farmers market, and see what the preferred layout would be. This could have some, I don't know, could have some CEQA issue, could not. Maybe we have to look at more comprehensively in terms of circulation, CEQA, parking, traffic, all those things as well.
So if I could comment, I think Commissioner Saxena recommended, raised a concern about creating a precedent. So I would actually be opposed to making any changes to the municipal plan, because I'm not sure that we're in a hurry.
The code, right?
The municipal code.
Okay.
Because I'm not sure we're in a hurry to start to create a category for, parking of, storage of cars for other lots. So I prefer not to see that. I think that a temporary permit would be more appropriate. Wouldn't establish, doesn't establish, by not doing a regular conditional use permit, we also don't establish, any kind of precedent that says that people who have large lots might seek a conditional use permit as well. And then I think I would actually, the only thing I would amend to that would be to make the term of the temporary permit to be 2 years, because it actually takes a while for things to get going, as we said. I mean, the approval of the hotel at Cupertino, what's the name of it? The one across from Apple Park, will not start
Hyatt
for,
House.
For almost
Oh,
a
no,
year.
the other one, the other one,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
The one without a name, but it's a high end.
Yes. So, that will be more than a year from the point where they were approved. So just so that this is reasonable, that it be, that we consider a 2-year term for a temporary permit, and the opportunity to renew, hopefully that won't be necessary.
Yeah, I think if I have my thought, I don't think Mr. Tersini is liking the 2-year idea.
So I'm just going to ask a hypothetical question, and this is only because we don't have a lot of large lots left in Cupertino. But let's say the Cupertino Union School District and Fremont Union School District was running out of funds, and Mr. Tersini's lease is over in 2 years, and they decided that to raise funds at I don't know, $25,000, $30,000 a month, they'd let them park their cars in their empty lots. That's basically the only other precedent I can see as an exception here. Right, and I'm sure that would be handled on a case-by-case exception basis as opposed to trying to pass a municipal code.
Yeah, I would certainly hope that we didn't, you know, I wouldn't be in a big rush to try to create that kind of land use. I think that, for the elementary schools, they don't really have enough parking. That would be an issue, although you could start saying, okay, well, do I want to start parking on the field?
On the fields.
Yeah.
That's all. I think that's the exception we're trying to avoid is that, and I don't think we have a lot of large lots left, so we have a different problem. So, okay, so it sounds like from everybody here that go ahead, Commissioner Moore.
Okay, so it looks like we are not going to place it in category 36, that it would go into 34 under other commercial uses, which are neither permitted uses nor excluded uses, and which are, in the opinion of the Planning Commission, consistent with the character of a general commercial zone. And we're not going to be adding any sort of caveat here that if it's a project that's getting ready to be redeveloped, that it would have a 2-year time limit placed on that, or do we want to do that? So it's really a question of whether or not you want to make any changes or recommend any changes to City Council in order to accommodate this.
I'm inclined to view this as a one-time exception. That is going to happen very rare. But if anyone here believes that this is going to be a policy issue that we might have that's repetitive, then that may be something we propose to council.
Yeah, I would agree. I would prefer that we not tie this to, a project in redevelopment, but that it be, in fact, that, this is a temporary permit rather than a conditional use permit for this site and this use.
Okay, so while you do say, that you don't think it's going to be repetitive, we saw this on the top of the parking garages, but on the south side of JCPenney, we saw it on the west side of the Bay Club parking lot, and also in, I believe it was the Macy's parking garage. There was also vehicles stored there. And
on the surface area to the west of Sears.
Correct, and there were, as far as I know, there were no conditional use permits issued for any of that, that's correct? Okay, so we actually have had a little bit of precedent on this.
And code enforcement, and code enforcement did warn them, right? Is that how many months of that did they get away with? All right, let's not go there. Let's not go there, okay.
Until somebody complains.
Mm-hmm. So, really quick, if I may, the discussion about potential code amendments, something to consider that it's not currently in our work program, so that may be something we'll look at for next year. I'm not sure that really fits in a timeline what we're talking about today. And also, there's also discussion about the temporary use permit. And the temporary use permit does not technically come to the Planning Commission. It's the Director of Community Development. And one of the key findings is that the application must not be detrimental to the public, to health, safety, welfare, and convenience. So those are one of the main findings that the Director of Community Development will have to find that's consistent with before approving a temporary use permit. So just something to keep in mind.
So I think go ahead.
Fellow commissioners, while we're talking about the process, I also want to have just general thought about the number of vehicles we should be recommending. So I think right now we are at 165, right? Do you have any thought on given on roughly what we have seen, what we should be suggesting? Because, especially if it's not going to come back to the Planning Commission.
Commissioner, that's also one of the things that we were touching on before is if you're thinking about making a modification or suggesting that the department consider a temporary use permit, we will have the opportunity to speak with the applicant, speak with the farmer's market, and talk to legal as well to see if there's any CEQA issues, traffic, talk to the city engineer, traffic circulation issues. So I would caution us putting a number on the parking today.
Okay.
I would assume that you'd want to become compliant to the parking analysis, which says you have a 68 space deficit to just from a legal requirement standpoint,
Right.
regardless of tenant.
Sure.
Right.
Right now, without looking at it further, I would say right now the site has a 97 space surplus. I would say, as of now, we would say at a very minimum, it should be consistent with that, but I'd be speaking without any further discussion or review.
So it sounds like we are headed towards, or there's some kind of agreement level that a temporary use permit here is something useful. And it sounds like that's part of the recommendation here. I want to check with staff as well. If we make a recommendation for a temporary use permit at that point, we will never see this come back to us again.
Well, I think we'll give legal a minute to
So let's legal figure that out.
consider that because right now in front of you, it's a use permit,
Correct.
right? It's not a temporary use permit. Temporary use permit, it's a separate, very different process.
It is a very different
So
process.
in front of you right now, it's a use permit. I believe you may have to act on a use permit.
We have to decide what to do with the use
Well,
permit
I'll let
first,
Seth.
and then go from there, I believe.
The use permit denial, the recommended use permit denial before you right now has some findings that may be inconsistent with what you're proposing
Yes.
be found. So you wouldn't have to act on tonight. You could just make a motion to direct staff to take other action. Yeah.
Okay, I understand. I just want to make sure that people understand the implications of what, if they vote to deny or they vote to approve, what that is. And if we vote to deny and with the thought of issuing a temporary use permit, what does that mean to the applicant? That's really what I was trying to get a clarification for.
I also think we need to pull up the findings from the draft resolution denial and perhaps change the language. If we can get it pulled up on the screen and we can craft what we want to say.
Actually, as a different option, can we ask that this go back to staff to work with the property owner to come up with a alternate plan, and that if that plan is something that fits within a temporary use permit, then, I don't know whether we need to approve that to happen, or whether that action can just happen. But I wonder if it's possible for us to just table any action on this tonight.
You do not have to take action on this tonight. You can direct staff to take this back and work with the applicant further, given what's on the record from tonight's meeting.
And what would happen to the applicant at that point in time? Do they just keep doing what they're doing until we get to a resolution?
I believe the status quo would continue. There would be a pending enforcement action, and they would have, I'm going to let the director weigh in.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we understand what the implications
Yeah,
are.
I think as long as, right now, we do have a pending code enforcement action that the property owner has received. I think with the direction from the commission tonight, it's fair to put a hold on that action. Well, obviously, it's to our benefit, everybody's benefit, to act on this as quickly as possible, so we'll make sure we have a resolution. I think the only question I have is we do have a pending use permit. If we table this and you send it back to staff, whether we need to have an actual action for the use permit eventually or not.
Is that a question to the city attorney?
Yeah.
So the action tonight would be, if you choose to take this course, to make a motion to send this back to staff to reconsider along the lines of what you've discussed tonight. I would not recommend, given what I've heard tonight, that you take action to approve the denial, or rather deny the permit, because the findings would be inconsistent with what you're talking about.
We're making for the double negatives. That's okay.
Right.
So, okay. Now, if we were to, okay, so that we all understand the implications here. I mean, so if we approve this permit today, then they will continue to do what they're doing. It's official. They're not under code enforcement. They get to do that. There's a fear from what I'm hearing that it sets a precedent for other people to do this. The actual reality is we don't have a lot of land to even do this on, if that is the case. So that's option one. Option two is send back to staff. So we don't have to deny anything. We just send back to staff, evaluate this, see if there's a temporary use permit process that can be accomplished. And at that point, staff will determine if there's a certain limit to the number of cars, where the placement would be, and agree and negotiate that with the property owner, and set a term. And I think there seems to be an understanding here that 2 years is okay. And then if we deny this, then it never comes back again. And at that point, the question to the property owner is, just so we understand the implication, which Commissioner Takahashi was kind of hinting at, is would there be enough funds to support a farmer's market that's being on there kind of as a community benefit that's not explicit and that's not, you've just been doing that. And so would you run into a deficit situation where you can't support that farmer's market being there and other activities that you have? Right. I think those are the three. You got a fourth?
No, I have a question. So it just sort of looks like the temporary use permit process allows staff to circumvent the municipal code. Am I understanding that correctly?
I hope not.
No, I think our recommendation is that we looked at the issue and that we found that this was consistent with the way that actually, well, how do I want to say this? The plan before us is not consistent with the temporary use permit, but that we're asking the staff to look for a solution that would be.
And I would like to add one caveat, Chair, to your first option, which is that should you not follow the recommendation and approve the conditional use permit tonight, the city attorney's office hasn't done I don't feel firm in our analysis under CEQA, because that exemption has not been part of the analysis for tonight's meeting.
So there is no CEQA exemption if we approve this?
For an approval, yes.
For an
There is for an denial.
Of course.
There may be an exception for an approval, but that's something, given the circumstances at the site and the farmer's market, we want to look into that a little further.
And
Right,
that would be, and that's part of the staff analysis.
Correct.
Right,
Whether
because
it-
you would
whether
have
it
to
was, yeah.
if we did approve it, you would have to reassess the viability of the current conditional use permit for the farmer's market and whether or not. Okay.
So the reality is, but if that analysis could take how long? 3 months, 2 months? We could run the clock out and they could be approved and up. I mean, that's the reality here. I mean, if you do it that way.
Yeah, the analysis could take, a month. I mean, if we sped it through, I mean, we do have, traffic consultants on retainer that we can go to and whatnot, but that would take further funding from the applicant also.
I will also say that the estimate will also include the assumption that our current work program has been taken care of, right? We have a pretty significant work program, so we have 5 planners on staff within departments.
So the best case scenario is that you can find a way to make the temporary use permit work.
Yeah, from what we're hearing tonight, I mean, that's a new option that's been brought up to us, so we didn't have an opportunity to say that, but I'm sure that's something that we can work with the property owner. I see a bunch of knots over there, so we can certainly work that out and have that discussion.
From the city attorney's perspective, so do we make a motion to suggest that we send this back to staff, looking at examining a temporary use permit and understanding if there are any kind of CEQA implications?
Yes.
Okay. Someone want to make that motion?
I'll do it if you, no?
You got it written down? You got it.
Well.
I was just going off the top of my head here.
Well, I think that.
So
that's
moved.
pretty close. So I think we are moving, the motion would be that we send this back to the staff to look at developing an alternative plan for the parking and for the farmer's market. And that and with that we have a belief that this may be, to pursue that as potentially as a temporary.
Putting a
a
2-year
temporary
time frame against it?
Yes, with a 2-year, and we recommend a 2-year time frame as well.
So we're recommending a 2-year time frame. We recommended that we take a look at a temporary use permit process that examines where the placement of the farmer's market is, as well as the number of vehicles that can be placed on that lot. Okay, anyone else?
What about the aspect of having it returned to us with a conditional use permit that we need to make findings for to approve?
I think maybe the way we would do that is if the staff goes off and does that negotiation, if they come back with a feeling that they can't do that as a temporary use permit, then it needs to come back as a conditional use permit, then to come back with appropriate report at that time.
You guys all comfortable with that? We have a motion in play?
Before you make a motion, I just want to make sure we're all clear over here. So it sounds like you're accounting for the possibility of staff and the CAO determining that it can be done by a temporary use permit
Without coming back?
without coming back. And so just so you understand, if we
Yes.
make that determination, it might not come back to you.
Yes.
The other item is that well, I'll hold off there.
And should the applicant not like the process, they can file another application for the conditional use permit that's in play, right? Worst case.
Like submit a different application?
Yeah, submit a new application. Okay. I just want to make sure that we all understand
Yeah.
what all the options
So
will
so
play
what
out.
happens to the October 22nd deadline?
That should be suspended, I believe.
Um,
Goes with the new
Could
application.
staff comment on what would happen to the October 22nd deadline for the denial of the conditional use permit, which we're looking at right now? So what happens to that?
I'm discussing this concurrently with staff. Let's discuss for a moment, and take 2 or 3 minutes.
Let's take a 5-minute break
Yeah.
while you guys do that.
Great.
Okay, so we're going to take a 5-minute break and come back here at 8:45. Wow, so early.
That's more than 2 hours, right? So he owes us a dinner.
Oh, yeah, staff owes us dinner. All right, we're going to come back and resume. I think staff has some comments to make as well, so please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. The director has spoken with the applicant. I'm under the impression that they've agreed, based on the discussion tonight, to withdraw the CUP application and submit to a discussion with staff about a potential temporary use permit.
And just so for clarity for the public who's watching, that means we do not have to make any decision since it's being withdrawn.
For clarity, I would recommend you make a motion as you were about to do, directing staff to work with the applicant.
Correct. Okay, so we have a motion in hanging that Commissioner Fung has set up. So I believe that I'll let you read it if you want to introduce it. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'll make a motion to direct staff to look at a temporary use permit for the said property, to look at establishing the time frame, which this Planning Commission has suggested 2 years, and to make a recommendation on the number of vehicles that can be on that space and a placement that would make sense for the community for the farmers market. That's the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? If not, we will vote. All right, everyone has voted, and the results are 5-0-0. Okay. All right, with that, let's go to staff, and there's no old business, no new business. Let's go to staff reports or commission reports.
We do not have any staff reports.
Okay. Commissioner Moore. Where have you been for the last 2 weeks? Everywhere.
Okay. Let's see. So September 12th, I attended the Silicon Valley at Home. What does it take to build housing? And our former assistant manager, Artie Shrivastava, was a forum member speaking there. On 9/15, I went to brunch with county supervisors Ellenberg and Chavez, and that was an event that I won a ticket from the Women's Leadership Conference, and we discussed various issues from youth services for previously incarcerated young adults to the need for childcare for women to enable them to participate in civics. On the 16th, I attended the public meeting on air quality, which also discussed Lehigh. And on the 17th, I attended the city council meeting, which ran into the wee hours of the morning. And then I attended the general plan city council meeting on the following day. I attended on the 19th the MTC executive board meeting in San Francisco. Unbeknownst to me, I attended Apple launch day. It was very crowded on the 20th. And on the 21st, I went to the presentation here on dementia, and it was a forum presentation, and it was very good. And it's also concerning because of the graying of our citizens, and the number of people who are going to need memory care is going to greatly increase, and it's a serious issue, and we all need to become educated about this.
All right. Commissioner Fung.
Had a number of activities. Attended the town hall on air quality on 9/16. There was a new meeting, the 2x2 CUSD and city council meeting. Attended that on 9/18. I attended Chefs of Compassion on 9/19. And the Sustainability Commission talk on zero waste, which was here last night, really quite amazing. The lady who was here, I don't know, did anybody else go to that? The lady who was here was talking about for her family. I came a few minutes late. It appears that she produces about 1 liter of waste per year.
Wow.
So everything else recycled, reused. Some of you may know Tim Way, who is a big zero waste proponent. He's only been able to get his family down to 1 liter per month. So he was blown away by her presentation. So it was really quite something. This was something new from the Sustainability Commission, sponsored this meeting, and it was kind of directed by their new the sustainability leader there, and it was a great presentation, completely full.
Excellent. Commissioner Saxena.
I don't have anything to report.
Commissioner Takahashi.
just the incredibly long city council meeting attending on the Ranger Trail. That's interesting.
I've been basically going up and down Lawrence Expressway and studying different projects that are purely residential and trying to understand the economic models for those projects. If you go up and down Lawrence Expressway, you'll notice that there are a lot of residential-only developments with a very, very little amount of retail. So just trying to understand how those business models work and try to understand how successful they can be if you're just doing pure residential, no office, or residential with a little amount of retail, and spending some time trying to understand the effects of that. Other than that, that's it for my reports. I do want to thank my fellow commissioners. I think we went into uncharted territory today, but worked out a very interesting compromise and proposal, and really hope that the applicants and the citizens and the residents actually benefit from it. So thank you, everybody. All right, with that, this meeting is adjourned.
There was a time in my life where I was extremely homesick. I decided that I needed a pet. When I first saw a turtle, my heart was full. He jumped up and kissed me and jumped